everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today I have with me a gentleman by the name of Leonard Webb. He is an author. He is the CEO of Webbolutionary Motivation, and he is an expert in the field of ending the school-to-prison pipeline. And I'm looking forward to picking his brain more about that. But first and foremost, as I always like to do because my parents raised me correctly, I'd like to take a moment to pause, say thank you for making time to hang out with me today. Time is a gift. Once we give it, we can't get it back. And with that, Mr. Webb, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me and giving me a platform to use to further my cause for the youth of our country. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Now, you work with ending the school to prison pipeline. And as I was getting prepared for today's show, I was doing some research on the internet, and quite surprisingly to me, I found a couple of articles where people were saying it was a myth. And that kind of brought into perspective to me that there might be people out that hear the term, but really don't understand the working components and aspects of it. So if I could trouble you in the beginning as we get going to kind of explain to it, and what are the elements of this whole thing called the school to prison pipeline?
Yeah, a lot of people think it's a metaphor, but it is an actual thing when you look at the stats, and I'll get into the stats in a little bit. But what it actually is policies and procedures that are in place in our educational systems that push our students out of the school system and into alternative schools, even arrested or suspensions or expulsions, and makes it more likely for them to end up in the criminal justice system. I'm actually a criminal justice professional. I worked in the criminal justice system for 27 years. I counseled guys that were in prison, in the federal prison system. And some of the things that had came to me while working there, because at the same time, I was an adjunct instructor at a local university. So I watched guys walk into my office, into the prison system, and I watched the same young men walk into my office at the college. And I began to think, what happened? I understand a lot of things because I grew up in that type of environment, and I was one of the lucky ones that found the pipeline to success, the pipeline to college, the pipeline to higher education. But I had a lot of friends that went the other way. And when I started to look back at the similarities, I saw my friends were getting pushed out of school. My friends were getting expelled, and they ended up in the criminal justice system. And here I have guys walking into my office at a prison who are very smart, very intelligent, and they ended up in the prison system. And there's no reason that I could think of, other than the crime, that what went wrong in their lives. And what I began to see was a pattern of these young men getting expelled. What I found was a lot of these young men were walking into my office with learning disabilities that were never diagnosed. They walked into my office with mental health issues that were never diagnosed in all their schooling years. And the ironic thing is, one of the first things they do when you get brought into the federal prison system is that you're given a learning test, which tests for learning disabilities. And that's crazy to think that you have to get locked up to find out that you have a learning disability. How do you go from K through 12 with a learning disability, end up in the prison system, and then they say, oh, guess what? You have a learning disability.
Yeah.
And some of the statistics, Black and brown girls are 6 times more likely to be expelled. Black and brown boys are 4 times more likely to be expelled. And when it goes to expulsions or referrals to alternative schools or even arrests, the statistics are the same. They are 4 to 6 times more likely in any of those categories than their white counterparts. And that's what I've turned my life into with the educational system. After 27 years, I left law enforcement and said, you know what? I've read this quote by Desmond Tutu, and it fits everything I do, and I say it all the time. Sometimes we got to stop pulling people out of the river and figure out why they're falling in. And that's really how I got into doing what I do now.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're glad you're doing it. Now, I want to kind of unpack some of the key points that you just mentioned. One of the topics that you brought up was suspension. And when you think of suspension, a kid getting suspended from school, you're thinking that they're posing some sort of dangerous threat either to other students, teachers, possibly the building itself. And then I just read on social media, this kid got suspended for, he was cutting his friend's hair in the bathroom or whatever. So that kind of brings to question for me, in today's educational system, what are the parameters for being suspended? What are some of the things that kids can get suspended for?
It's all subjective and it's all dependent on that school district. We're having kindergarten students get suspended, and the kids are getting suspended from everything from drawing a gun, talking about guns, hugging too hard. Can you imagine that? But
Hugging too hard.
Hugging too hard, drawing pictures, hitting. And it's really amazing that a lot of times these problems could be solved if the educators would just ask the question, why, instead of going right to the suspension. Another thing that I found is that a lot of suspensions are for subjective behaviors, like disrupting class. What is that?
Yes.
Most of the children that are getting suspended aren't getting suspended for drugs or fighting or weapons. They're not getting suspended for that. They're getting suspended for disrupting class, yelling, things that noise level violations, things that are very subjective to the individual that's in the room. And if you have an individual that's in the room that really doesn't understand culture and doesn't understand certain things, then their first turn is to go right to suspension.
Wow. And so it's subjective to the teacher, or does it go, is the process that it goes to like the principal, or how does it get to this point?
The teacher, and usually what happens is they compound the behavior. Well, they yelled today, they were late the day before, they hit another student on the shoulder the day before, and what happens is, okay, we need to suspend them. Wow. And those type of reactions don't work. They don't make the child any better. Yes. And actually they're worse, because the child is missing time in the classroom, and now they're behind, and it makes it harder for them to be in the classroom because they're behind. Okay. There are two real main issues that affect suspensions, and it's the zero tolerance policies, which they originally came about in the 90s with weapons. School shootings became a big thing, and there were zero tolerance policies for weapons in the school. But what happened was, now they're using zero tolerance policies for, zero tolerance policies for touching, zero tolerance policies for curse words, zero tolerance policies for dress codes. And it was originally brought in place as a form of safety, but now it's being used as a form of classroom management, which is totally wrong. And the second thing is school resource officers, which are bringing police officers into the building. And I was a police officer once. We had no training in childhood behavior, childhood brain development. Yes. And the culture of police work is to make an arrest when something goes wrong. And they're arresting students for those school behaviors that could be handled by a principal. But the principal are giving up their authority to the police officer. And so when the police officer says, let's make an arrest, they're just making an arrest. Wow. Rather than, hey, let's see if there's something wrong at home. Let's see if a family member has died. Let's see if there's a change of circumstances. Instead of asking those questions, why this may be happening, they're going right to suspensions, expulsions, and transfers to alternative schools. Wow. So first of all, I'm just puzzled that anybody would think that it's a good thing to suspend a kindergartner. I don't understand that. But then
also what you said, like suspending kids for dress code. I remember, and it's been a long time since I was in high school or whatever, but I remember teachers that would have a reserve of like extra clothes. So if a kid came and they were improperly dressed, they would pull them to the side and like, here, baby, put this on, you know, so you can finish out the school day. The dynamics of the whole role of public school or whatever, I guess it's seriously shifted. It seems to be not conducive to the children these days. So what is the primary goal of school systems these days? Then I guess I should ask.
The first thing they're doing nowadays, as the statistics show, is punishment. They're viewing things from a deficit point of view, that the children are just being disruptive. The children just don't want to be there, rather than, again, asking the question why. And I'll give you a great example of a second grader in Pittsburgh who had brought a knife to school. And this principal wanted to know, you know, you're in second grade, you're 7 years old. Why did you bring a knife to school? She said, I walk to school every day and these kids take my money and I'm just tired of it. I come to school, I don't have any lunch money and I don't eat. And this is the only meal I have for a long time.
Wow.
So he said, honey, where do you live? And he looked at where the bus goes. And he said, if the bus can get you, if you can get here, can you get on the bus and get to school? And she said, yes, that's a shorter walk than I do for school. And he made arrangements for that bus to pick her up at that spot, rather than suspending her for having a weapon.
Awesome.
Sometimes it's just that simple, but we're not asking the question why. And usually it's based on what I've learned is biases in the teachers in some areas, because a lot of teachers don't look like you and me. 76% of teachers are white females. Only 2% of educators are Black males. So there's a deficit there, and sometimes there's a conflict there, and that these behaviors are being looked at as violent or threatening, rather than understanding that some things are part of culture. Some languages are part of culture.
Yes.
Some hairstyles are part of culture. They're not dress code violations. They're not meant to be threatening. They're not meant to be, it's just the way we, you know, a culture. And if you don't understand the culture, if you don't understand the culture, you may look at it a different way. I always say that assumptions are the first barrier in a relationship. And when a kid walks into a classroom, whether they had an older brother or sister that was in trouble, or whether they're from a certain neighborhood, when teachers have that assumptions already about a child, we're already behind. That child is already in a hole.
Gotcha. Now I want to ask this, and I guess it's a two-part question. When a child finds themselves in the process of being suspended, they have been suspended, how do they recover from that? Because I'm assuming that it's a label that they now carry with them in their school career. And how does a parent kind of say, you know, attack this public school system of why did you suspend my child? How do we kind of navigate that process?
Every state has guidelines about suspensions and rights of the student when they're suspended or how they get suspended. A lot of times what's happening is that parents are not informed about what those rights are. And administrators are using this as leverage. I don't know if you've ever heard of someone getting called to come pick up their child because they're acting out. That's actually a suspension. And some school districts are actually doing that. And they're saying, well, in lieu of a suspension, come pick up your child and we won't suspend them. But by picking up your child, you are suspending them. You suspended their day. Now, every state has different kind of laws that govern suspensions, but parents, if I can stress anything, you need to know your rights as far as that goes. You can appeal suspensions. You can have meetings about what happened. There needs to be a report. You can look at the report of, you know, why the child was suspended. But if you don't know those rights, sometimes a lot of times parents are just silent because we don't know. We don't stay in the conversation long enough to understand our rights. And I beg parents that if your child is being disciplined, it may be uncomfortable, but stay in the conversation.
Gotcha.
Don't get out because you're uncomfortable. You don't know certain words, and educators like to use, IEPs and 504s and a lot of educational lingo to intimidate parents. And we have to be strong enough to say, what's that mean?
Gotcha.
What's that say? And what's the guiding principles of this? Rather than take everything as just, well, they're educators, they know.
Okay. Now, once a child gets suspended, that's with them for the rest of their career in school?
If it's not by state, you can guarantee that teachers talk.
Okay.
And teachers will say, if a second grade is going into third grade, you can guarantee that third grade teacher is saying, how is that student? I have an office in a high school, and I can always say, well, that kid in middle school, was trouble, and they're doing the same thing. And sometimes you just never get a fresh start. Some students aren't getting just a fresh start, a reset, an opportunity to change their behavior.
Gotcha. Now, what is the process from suspension? Is there like a set number that you have to be suspended where you get kicked out to alternative school?
No, administrator can put a child in alternative school without a suspension. There's no set number for that. It could just be the process, the nature of what they feel the offense is, and what the parents are willing to accept. Usually after, if it's over 3 to 5 days, there's a certain appeal process. There's a certain meeting that you can have, but all those numbers vary from state to state, and your rights vary from state to state.
Wow. So we really need to stress that parents need to get in there and get involved. And I think, like you mentioned, a lot of us, and especially depending on what socioeconomic environment that you come from, you might not really understand that there's a process where you can remove this stigma or this label from your child, but you have to fight it. And sometimes we just don't know we have those options. So it's good to have that information out there. Now, I'm curious, the work that you do you go into school systems and teach teachers how to be teachers or students how to be students?
I try and do a three-pronged approach. I try and help parents understand the process. I help students try and achieve academic success.
Okay.
And I help teachers overcome implicit biases and learn cultural relevance so they can become better communicators and build better relationships with students that don't look like them.
Gotcha.
And when I say don't look like them, I'm not always talking about race. I'm talking about, like you said, socioeconomic, rural versus city. I'm talking about a lot of things. And those relationships need to occur. Those conversations need to occur, because I know some of my best relationships have come from people that are the exact opposite of me, because I'm able to learn something from them. And as a child, and you see a teacher that may not look like you, but wants to know what your favorite TV show is, wants to know, certain things about how your favorite food, that builds a relationship.
That's true. I know in my own personal experience, it was quite a few teachers that didn't look like me that actually propelled me to college, that actually, took the time and mentored me. So sometimes you do get some good mentorship and input into your life from people that don't look like you, that have different perspectives, that show you this is an option for you. Your journey doesn't have to end up like this. It can end up like this. So, that's a good point. But I want to, on this vein, I want to read something that you posted, and you kind of mentioned it, but I want to ask a question from it. And it said, the post said, the average American school teacher is a white 43-year-old female who makes $43,900 per year. So my question is, I'm going to assume that this type of teacher, she commutes into a particular area to teach students that don't look like her, and like we mentioned, different socioeconomic status. What kind of training do these particular type of individuals need to be effective in school systems that probably don't have a lot of students that look like them?
I think the base level is just understanding who you are your personality type. We're all drawn to people that look or act like us. And part of it is understanding what type of personality do I have? Am I a dominant personality? Am I interactive? Am I supportive? Am I conscientious? A lot of teachers are that conscientious type. We've kind of, our educational system has kind of been guided to people that are compliance based, I should say. Okay. And we kind of miss the needs of the children, because we're all, sit at your desk, pencil here, paper here, hands folded. That's what everybody would say a good student is. But there are good students that like to talk. And part of the training that I do is, how can we use that? How can we, that's obviously their superpower, because when I was in school, I was scared to death to get in front of people. But I was one of those compliance kids. You tell me to sit down and be quiet, I'll sit down and I'll be quiet. But that's my superpower. I'm more linear in thinking. I'm more that type of way. While there were other students that like to challenge things. They want to know why it is this way. And it's not to be threatening or disrespectful.
I just want to know.
That's just how they're wired. And a child that likes to talk is very interactive. And how can we use that in the classroom to support them, rather than saying, you can't do that here, because then they go home and that's where self-esteem issues come from. Gotcha. Something's wrong with me because I like to talk. No, child. Nothing is wrong with you. That's your superpower. Maybe one day you'll be a salesperson.
True.
Or motivational speaker. That's your superpower. How can we do this in the classroom?
Got you. Understood. Now, that kind of brings home an issue that I'm seeing a lot today. Is a lot of teachers are just, I'm done. I'm walking out. And it takes teachers to kind of nurture and encourage these individual superpowers that these students have. Teachers, are they just exhausted today because of the children, or are they exhausted because of the higher administration, or because we need the teachers to be on board? So what's going on and how do we fix that?
My belief is most teachers aren't quitting because of the kids. They're quitting because of the adults.
Okay.
And that includes administrators and parents. And there's just no connection anymore. Okay. Parent-teacher conferences aren't being attended. That's something that parents, we have Zoom, we have all kinds of things that you can get in contact with a teacher and see how your student's performing. I tell teachers, your first call to a parent should never be, your child did this wrong. Your first call to every single child in your classroom, to that parent, should be, it's a pleasure to have your child in my class. I'm here for you if you need me. And I have an open line of communication.
Gotcha.
That's every first call should be that.
Gotcha.
Because if we're only making calls of why things are going wrong, why am I picking up the phone? Why do I want to collaborate with you? Why do I want to be in partnership with you, when the only time I hear from you is when something's wrong? I think administrators are pushing teachers out, just like in ways that children are getting pushed out of school. They're being asked to do a whole lot. There are some schools without nurses. There are some schools without counselors. So kids are going to school without their physical needs being met. They're going to school without their mental health needs being met. And it makes it difficult for teachers because they're not being educators. They're being social workers. They're being policemen. They're being lunch ladies and lunch people, I should say. Wow. They're being stretched far more for the lowest salary.
Overworked. Things sure have changed. I've been out of school for a long time. My daughter's 27. She's been out of school for a long time. So I'm just listening to you like, wow, amazing. Oh, okay. Wow. So you mentioned parents are not attending parent-teacher conferences, and that just seems like that is a wonderful opportunity for a parent who's invested in their child's success to kind of be able to put the puzzle pieces in. why are these parents not connecting with teachers, and what do we have to do? What do we have to do to get my child to the next level, to the next level, to the next level? Because I mean, the parents bear some responsibility as well, right?
Yes. I don't. I include parents in the responsibility as well as part of my programming.
Okay.
I do push institutions to make it a favorable place for a parent to enter, maybe having coffee, hellos, and that type of things, greetings, which I don't usually see in the schools that I've been to. It's just not inviting for a parent. But parents, and I'll say this to all the parents that are listening, be that parent.
Okay.
We need to be that parent. And when I say that, I don't say it in a way where, you're seen and not heard. Because I had a parent at a school I was at, and she came in and she was angry, just totally yelling and screaming. And I pulled her to the side. I said, "Ma'am, do you want to be seen or do you want to be heard? Because right now you're just being seen." I said, "Calm down, and I guarantee you'll be heard." I said, "I'll walk in with you, but right now you're just being seen." And part of that is you feel like you don't have any power, and that you need to expose some power, just like with a lot of other things that go on. We need to show some power, but the power is knowing what your rights are. The power is coming in informed. The power is asking questions, and that's what parents aren't doing.
Gotcha.
Not being at the base level, they're just not informed of what their rights are. I'll give you an example really quick, is that if a child's being questioned at school, they have the right to remain silent. They don't have to say a word. If you have a child with a individualized education plan, you can actually have stuff put in the plan to help that. Hey, my child is vulnerable to authority figures. They usually tell authority figures what they want to hear rather than the truth. So because of that, do not question my child without me present.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's a legal binding document. But if you don't know those things, and you haven't prepared your child for that, they see a principal, they see a teacher, and they say, "Hey, tell me what happened." Now they've lost all their rights.
Gotcha.
Like locker searches or whatever, they can say, "You can't search my locker." Doesn't mean that they won't do it, but you're protecting your future rights. And that's what a lot of parents don't get. It's about protecting your future rights, just in case your child is suspended for something. You're protecting yourself from future things. And we're just going in not as informed as we should be.
So I guess my next question is, first day of school, are there handbooks handed out, that we're just not reading or something? I mean, because it has to be somewhere where this is your rights, right?
I've never encountered anyone that I know in education that has a school system that says, "These are your rights. Here's your handbook of rights." Now, you may get a handbook, but when you get to legal terms or whatever, and I seriously doubt that they're giving them out. They're probably saying, "Here they are online nowadays," but some people don't have access to online stuff. Some people just don't understand the terminology that's being used in those things. What would help is if you can get parents in and say, "Here is how it works. If your child is suspended 1 day, here are your rights. If your child is suspended 5 days, here are your rights. If your child is suspended more than 10 days, here are your rights. Here are the reasons why." It all comes with whoever's in charge, what their educational philosophy is. And I tell all administrators, you need to have an educational philosophy. If you have a policeman in the building, your teachers need to know when they can call them. They don't call them for classroom management. They call them if there's a weapon involved, if there's drugs involved. But you need to set out the guidelines of when they're allowed to call, an SRO, a school resource officer, or a police officer that's in the building. That's where I think a lot of it's missed.
Okay. I think I read, but the school resource officers, I think I read on your page that crime actually goes up where they're present.
Yes, that has been one of the things. More arrests are being made when they're present. You say, well, they're finding their arrests, but they're arresting them for classroom behaviors. The majority of misconduct in schools are, again, subjective behaviors, disrupting class, being too loud. But what's happening in a lot with school resource officers, as a former law enforcement officer, this is what happens. There's a fight, that's an assault. That's how they look at it. Instead of, when I was growing up, if we fought, we go to the principal's office. Why are you fighting? What happened? And whatever happens, happens. I was suspended 3 days in the 7th grade myself for fighting in class. And luckily, because statistics show, again, that a student suspended at least once is almost 50% more likelier to drop out. So it's my whole thing with administrators and teachers, let's find ways to keep them in the classroom, because obviously getting them out is not helping.
Yes. Yes, they need to be there. And in the opening, you mentioned school systems have developed a zero tolerance philosophy. And it reminds me of the shambles that we put ourselves in a country with the zero tolerance when it came to drugs. And if it ended up, we found out that all we did was put in prison more Black and brown men. And it seems like we're replicating this whole philosophy with our public education system. And you would think more light bulbs would be going on at this particular point, but I guess you have much more work to do, Mr. Webb.
Yeah, I had posted today, different day, same story, based on the events of the verdict today.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
It's all the same. If I could say anything to especially young Black and brown students out there, is understanding there's 3 types of capital in the world. There's social capital, financial capital, and educational capital. And social is all about power and influence. Financial is not just having money, it's knowing how to move money around so money makes money for you. And the educational capital is, again, understanding what your rights are, how to get the education, how to get in the rooms where conversations are being held that we're not included in right now, and understanding how the system actually works.
Gotcha. I love it. I love it. And I know when I was young growing up, my mother used to always tell me, what you do now, it always plays out later. So you got to do right now, because that's going to travel with you. Your record's going to travel with you as you go. And these youngsters in these school systems, especially our Black and brown kids, they need to understand, what they do now is going to travel with them. And, hopefully we can, get some Mr. Webbs out there, kind of getting these kids on the right path, because so much is predicated on the foundation,
And what's really interesting is for Black and brown girls, and this has been going to be my theme for 2022, is really focusing on Black and brown girls, because we've kind of forgotten about them in these type of talks, because a lot of programs and a lot of grants are being funded to Black and brown boys because of what happened, years ago with the crack law and incarcerating young Black men. But Black and brown girls are seemingly invisible, and they're the ones that are most affected. They're the ones that have the highest, compared to their white counterparts, differences. Black and brown girls, like I said, are 6 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than their white counterparts, where Black and brown boys is 4. And what amazes me is that when Black and brown girls enter college, they're the most likely to graduate. Think about that. Going from the formative years, K through 12, of being the most expelled, the most moved to alternative schools, the most suspended, they finally get to the ones that get there,
We're the
at
one.
the college are the ones that are producing the most. So we know they have the superpowers to do it. It's just helping them not get off track, building a bridge with Black and brown girls like we were trying to do with Black and brown boys.
Awesome. Awesome. Great, great. And I'm thinking when it comes to suspension, I'm wondering, because I'm assuming, like a lot of times parents are working or whatever. How do people figure I can suspend this child for 10 days and that's going to be more productive for them than coming to school? Because now this child is unsupervised, maybe at home, or maybe the parent has to take off 10 days. I mean, is nobody kind of thinking this through?
I think they are. I think, unfortunately, it's part of the system. It's meant to be that way. When I started really digging into the statistics, I wasn't surprised, but that doesn't mean I wasn't saddened. I wasn't traumatized. It really, you're just not surprised because of how everything is set up, but you're still saddened that it's going on. Yeah, I hate to end on that note.
No.
but it's just like it's how it is. It's how it's working in the way that, for me, it's supposed to work.
Yeah, how they designed it.
And we have to figure out a way to end that. And that's why I love the term ending the school to prison pipeline. I know there's a lot of other people doing great work, disrupting and dismantling. For me, it's about ending it. It's about a new paradigm shift in how schools do discipline.
Got you. And, I think one of the biggest thing is parents need to understand that they have a mouthpiece, a role and responsibility in the school systems that they put their children in. And then also we need to teach the children at home that you have, like you mentioned, you have certain rights if you ever find yourself in these situations. And as a student, even though this is an adult, these are the things that you can do to protect yourself down the line when it comes to potential suspensions and stuff like that. But it's all empowering ourselves with education and knowledge. And sadly, some of us in our communities, we just don't have nowhere to go. They're not giving it to us. They're not, hey, they'll give us a Burger King and a McDonald's, but they won't give us certain knowledge. But, that's it. Well, Mr. Webb, I'm at the end of my more than 30 minutes I've taken up of your time.
Sorry about that. I took it up.
No, it's my fault. I try to kind of keep it packaged, but my fault. You have, let me do my random question, and then I want to have you plug, because you have books and all of that stuff, and then we want to see how we can connect with you and get you to possibly come to schools. But let's see what we got for the random question here. Let's see what we got. You don't have to, this one, you don't have to tell me the name, but just say yes or no. Do you still remember the name of the first person you had a crush on?
Yes.
Brings a smile to your face. Okay. Yeah. So you have books out that we didn't get a chance to talk about. And how do we connect with you, get the book, we get your services, and, just find out more about you? How do we get in touch with you?
My website is intheschooltoprisonpipeline.com. The 2 is the number 2. On social media, it's Webbolutionary Motivation. On LinkedIn, it's Leonard Webb. I have a flow page where you can get all my resources. I have a senior success plan. That's a free PDF on there. It's flow page /Webbolutionarymotivation.com, and that will lead you to my Square Point store where you can get that. I didn't wear it today because I just got this today, and I just love the Negro thing. But I have T-shirts that have "In the School," and you'll see it on my social media. In the School, the Prison Pipeline. My 2 books. My first book is Youth Champ, a guide for teens to strive through your formative years. My second book, which is a bestseller, I collaborated with 18 other great authors and people that are making an influence in the world, and it's Impact of Influence Volume 2. You can also get that at my Square store. They're also available for purchase at Amazon.com. Not to plug them. From my Square store, I get the proceeds directly and don't have to share with Amazon. But if that's all you have,
Yeah, we'll go with
That's
it.
okay.
Well, Mr. Webb, especially when it comes to my Black and brown future, my kids, I truly appreciate the work that you're doing and what you're pouring into this world, and the change that you're trying to spark and bring about. I just applaud you and the work that you do. Thank you from little old me in my corner of the world for
Yes. Thanks for having me.
your
Wonderful.
thank
Keep
you.
doing what you do.
I'm gonna do my little small part to spotlight you guys. So I think you guys are doing wonderful work. So I'm gonna shout on my little corner. So, but that. But anyways, Mr. Webb, I've enjoyed my conversation with you today. Continued success.
Thank you.
With that, that's all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time.